So let's talk about security technology, access controls, firewalls, and VPN. Intrusions. These are attempts to compromise the confidentiality, integrity, and availability, otherwise known as your CIA triad, or to bypass the security mechanisms of a computer system or network, which is illegal access. Intrusions have many causes, and these include malware, which are worms, spyware, or attackers gaining unauthorized access to systems from the internet, and authorized users of systems who misuse their privileges or attempt to gain additional privileges for which they are not authorized. For the purposes of this course, you could look at intrusion detection, which is the process of monitoring the events occurring in a computer system, or intrusion detection systems, which is IDS, which is a software that automates the intrusion detection process, or an intrusion prevention system, which is software that has all the capabilities of an intrusion detection system and can also attempt to stop possible incidents. An IDPS might also alter the settings for when certain alerts are triggered or what priority should be assigned to subsequent alerts after a particular threat is detected. For example, with an IPS, you can terminate the network connection or user session that is being used for the attack. You could block access to the target from the offending user account, IP address, or other attacker attributes. The IPS changes the security environment. The IPS could change the configuration of other security controls to disrupt an attack, such as reconfiguring a network device. These would include firewalls, routers, or switches to block access from the attacker or to the target. The IPS could also change the attack's content. We will find that some IPS technologies can remove or replace malicious portions of an attack to make it benign. An example is an IPS removing an infected file attachment from an email and then permitting the cleaned email to reach its recipient. There are different classes of detection methodologies. Signature-based, which compares known threat signatures to observed events to identify incidents. We know that this is very effective at detecting known threats, but largely ineffective at detecting unknown threats and many variants unknown threats. For example, a telnet attempt with a username of root, which is a violation of an organization's security policy. An email with a subject of free pictures and an attachment file name of freepics.exe, which are characteristics of a known form of malware. Another example is a profile for a network might show that a web activity comprises an average of 13% of network bandwidth at the internet border during a typical workday hour. The IDPS then uses statistical methods to compare the characteristics of current activity to thresholds related to the profile, such as detecting when web activity comprises significantly more bandwidth than expected and alerting an administrator of the anomaly. Profiles can be developed for many behavioral attributes, such as the number of emails sent by a user, the number of failed login attempts for a host, and the level of processor usage for a host in a given period of time. What are the components of intrusion detection? Audit records, audit data preprocessor, activity data, detection models, detection engines, and alarms. A decision table, a decision engine, all come together along with alarms to create the action report. This allows information to be observed. Normal and intrusive activities have distinct evidence. Again, for anomaly detection, we are looking at activity measures like CPU usage and then a possible or probable intrusion based on the normal profile and the gap between that and the abnormal. Relatively high false positive rates. Anomalies can just be new normal activities and anomalies caused by other element faults. Example, a router failure. When looking at network-based IDSs, we can see that there are different formats that all come together when we're speaking about the internet, gateway routers and our network, and host-based detection. At the early stage of the worm, only limited worm samples are there. Over time, host-based sensors can only cover limited IP space, which might have scalability issues. Thus, they might not be able to detect the worm in its early stage. The worm is being transported using the internet, trying to get through the gateway routers to our network. Intrusion prevention systems have been promoted as cost-effective ways to block malicious traffic, to detect and contain worm and virus threats, to serve as a network monitoring point, to assist in compliance requirements, and to act as a network sanitizing agent. So why intrusion detection prevention systems? And why do we use them? Well, they're used for identifying possible incidents, logging information about them, attempting to stop them, and reporting them to security administrators. This is combined with identifying problems with security policies, documenting existing threats, and deterring individuals from violating security policies. Now you can deploy them outside of the firewall or just inside of the firewall. A combination of both will detect attacks getting through the firewall and may help to refine firewall rule sets. You can place them behind remote servers, between business units, between corporate networks and partner networks. Sensors may need to be placed in all switch network segments. Sensors, firewalls, mail servers, perimeter network, consoles, and protected networks are all components when we're looking at intrusion detection prevention systems. Most IDPSs also offer features that compensate for the use of common evasion techniques. Evasion is modifying the format or timing of malicious activity so that its appearance changes but its effect is the same. Attackers use evasion techniques to try to prevent IDPSs from detecting their attacks. For example, an attacker could encode text characters in a particular way, knowing that the target understands the encoding and hoping that any monitoring IDPSs do not. Most IDPSs can overcome common evasion techniques by duplicating special processing performed by the targets. If the IDPS can see the activity in the same way that the target would, then evasion techniques will generally be unsuccessful at hiding attacks. So what should organizations do? Organizations should determine if they require IDPSs. They should also need to define specialized sets of requirements for the following: security capabilities, performance, and management, which included the design and implementation, operation and maintenance, and training, documentation and technical support, life cycle costs, both initial and maintenance cost. For anomaly-based detection, sample network activity to compare to traffic that is known to be normal. When measured activity is outside the baseline parameters or clipping level, an IDPS will trigger an alert. Anomaly-based detection can detect new types of attacks. An IDPS can also perform recording information relating to observed events and also notifying security administrators of important observed events. Information is usually recorded locally and might also be sent to separate systems such as a centralized logging server or security information and event management solution. When you're notifying security administrators, this notification may be known as an alert and may take the form of audible signals, emails, pager notifications, or log entries. When producing reports, the reports summarize the monitored events or provide details on particular events of interest. When deploying an IDPS, key servers that contain mission-critical and sensitive information is a good location. Web servers, FTP and DNS servers, e-commerce, database servers, and other high-value assets. An IDPS could be network-based to perform packet sniffing and analyze network traffic to identify and stop suspicious activity. They receive packets, analyze them, decide whether they should be permitted, and allow acceptable packets to pass through. They allow some attacks such as network service worms, email worms, and viruses, which easily are recognizable characteristics. Most products use a combination of attack signatures and analysis of network and application protocols. A host-based IDPS is similar in principle, and the purpose is to work on a network base, except that a host-based product monitors the characteristics of a single host and the events occurring within that host, such as a monitoring network traffic. They often use a combination of attack signatures and knowledge of expected or typical behavior to identify known and unknown attacks on systems. For network behavior analysis, this examines network traffic to identify threats that generate unusual traffic flows, such as denial of service and distributed denial of service, certain forms of malware, and policy violations. All of these fall under the umbrella of the network behavior analysis. NBA systems are most often deployed to monitor flows on an organization's internal network. And number 4, wireless, which monitors wireless network traffic and analyzes its wireless network protocols to identify suspicious activity involving the protocols themselves. It cannot identify suspicious activity in the application or higher layer network protocols that the wireless network traffic is transferring, but it is most commonly deployed within range of an organization's wireless network to monitor it. But it can also be deployed to locations where unauthorized wireless network could be occurring. So the network IDS deploying sensors at strategic locations. Example, packet sniffing via TCP dump at routers. This includes inspecting network traffic, monitoring user activities, and it may be easily defeated by encryption. What are the key metrics of IDS and IPS? Algorithms, detections, false alarms, architecture, throughput of NIDs targeting 10S or of GPPS. Now there are limitations of exploit-based signatures. Polymorphism. Again, trying to get through the internet through our traffic filtering to our network. Which polymorphic worm might get through to our network? You have to do a test vulnerability signature. The vulnerability signature is identified through traffic filtering. Signature 10.01. Polymorphism through the internet, through traffic filtering, gets through to our network. But we are able to block anything with a signature 10.01. Everything else is allowed into our network. Polymorphic worm might not have the exact exploit-based signature. In some cases, you may choose to block even more using the vulnerability signature for traffic filtering. The vulnerability signature is able to identify which worms have a specific signature attached to it. This would work for polymorphic worms and for all the worms which target the same vulnerability.